Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the SBA princess herself, Brandi Nelson. Brandi, before we dig in, I have lots of interesting things I want to discuss with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, really excited to be a part of your team and be here with both of you. You guys are both amazing people. So thank you for having me and for allowing me to be on your team. So I've been in the banking industry for 23 years, or I should say I have been or had been. And a majority of my banking experience has been in commercial lending and SBA lending. So really focusing on small businesses around the purpose of helping others. That's really my goal, is to be able to serve others and to do great things. I live in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities actually, and grew up in Montana. So I kind of have lived all over the Midwest with my family. So I have two children, a 10-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. And then my husband and I, who have been married, almost 21 years.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
me.
that's great.
So, Brandi, and I know it wasn't an easy decision for you, but, we are a fairly small but mighty entrepreneurial company. And it's really difficult for folks who grew up or spent most of their life and career working in big banks or banks of different sizes to join something that's different. And it's not easy to convince people to do that. I fail more than I succeed, but you did it. Tell us a little bit about that decision and why.
Yeah, it was interesting. It came at the perfect time when we met. Now, you and I and Lynn have met several times over the years at Nagel. And so I had gotten to know you personally, which is important to me. But I previously worked for Bremer Bank and built an SBA team out for them. And over about 5 years, we grew the SBA department from averaging about 17 million to almost 80 million in closings the last year we were together as a team. And our bank was ultimately sold this year in May. And so that led me, as the director of SBA, to have to make a really tough decision. As you know, Ami, because you walked along that path with me for several months, it was a really hard decision. You're right. I had a lot of great opportunities presented to me. But thank you. And Lynn, thank you for your insight along the way and not pressuring me. But ultimately, I chose multifunding because I chose you guys and your team. I love that it's not transactional. A lot of people, when they hear business brokers, they think, when's that next deal going to close? And even in the SBA world, it can become very transactional. Relationship is the basis of everything I do. It really is, even personally and professionally. And I fell in love with you and your team. And so it really is about the customer. It's about the journey, being a part of the journey from beginning to end, and really being able to make sure that we're finding the right fit client, which is the bank, right? The right fit bank for their customer, so that both ends are happy on the end and they get the loan and potentially, their other bank gets to keep the relationship and everything gets done. And so that's ultimately why I chose, was people, relationship, and doing the right thing.
I think
So,
that's great. And I think that you're right about multifunding. There's definitely a culture here that couldn't be further from corporate America banking, but it's very refreshing. I'd like to dig into what you think about this question, Brandi. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about SBA lending and why it's so confusing to business owners, and why they just don't understand the benefits? And what do you think is this is the niche that we're trying to fill. So what are your opinions about that?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting from a client perspective and a banker perspective. It can be very different, right? From a client perspective, over the many years, I've heard the customers say it's too expensive, it takes too much time, and I just would rather not do it. Right. And those are things that go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where unfortunately, I do think the program back then was not that customer friendly, but the SBA has done a really good job, and bankers have done a good job of educating themselves so that it is affordable capital. It's a great way to be able to get what you want done and save your working capital. And it's an easier way to get a yes. And so again, but the key is finding the right bank. and being able to know that they know what they're doing, because there are lenders out there that don't know what they're doing. From a banker's perspective, as I've partnered with bankers over the last many years, you hear the same thing. Bankers, a lot of those more traditional, conventional bankers are afraid of the product because of time and money. But what they generally find once they do their first deal is it's easy. It doesn't cost. The client wants to pay for it because they want to get it done, right? And it's affordable. And so those are the things. Also, lastly, I think COVID helped the SBA program dramatically, because clients know more about SBA in their own way than sometimes bankers. And clients are coming in and asking for SBA. That never happened before COVID, hardly ever. But my favorite call was the banker that would say, I have an SBA, a customer that wants SBA. What do I do? Because the customer actually wants it. So it's kind of fun.
I think that SBA, and I'd love to hear what both of you think about this, has a major branding problem. Okay. So always, but
Mhm.
so many times someone's friend had a crappy SBA experience, and so they think SBA loans suck. Okay. What they don't know is what their friend's business was like and what bank or lender that started with.
Mhm.
And or somebody goes to we've seen it time and time again. Somebody goes to an SBA lender or a lender and gets bad information about the SBA that may or may not, that might be lender specific, but is not program specific. And so there is, I think, which is a big part of what we're trying to solve for, is there's a brand by association problem, right? And it hurts the program all the time, but I don't think anyone's necessarily trying to solve for it. What do you think about that?
Well, I absolutely agree. I mean, I've been doing this for, I hate to say how many years, but SBA has gone, and I worked there back in the days that Brandi mentioned when SBA was still doing direct loans. They had a terrible reputation. It took a really long time for them to transfer from direct loans to participating loans, which is how the lenders do it now. And the SBA guarantees, it took the lenders a long time to get on board, do it right, and for the SBA to centralize processing so that this federal program was being delivered the same way across the country from bank to bank and so forth. And the thing that Brandi mentioned about COVID is that all of a sudden PPP was everywhere and the SBA was brought into the forefront. The only problem with that is that PPP and SBA loans are completely different. They're not the same. But on some levels, it really was the best advertising they ever had. But on the other hand, it's not. Brandi, what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's interesting because I tell my kids all the time, if you're going to say one thing negative, I want you to say 5 things positive, because that one thing negative spreads faster than fire on a dry grass,
Right.
right? And so I do think that unfortunately we're all human and we spread negativity faster and more rapidly than that one client that had the most amazing experience ever,
Right.
right?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And the beauty of multi-funding is the fact that, somebody might have had a really bad experience working with an inexperienced bank. And even us brokers here have had really bad experiences with specific banks. But what we can do for the client is get them to the right bank, because as Ami mentioned, clients that go into a bank that has specific credit policies on top of SBA's requirements, they tell the borrower they're not qualified and they walk away. Some of them deflated, but if they know that there's people like MultiFunding out there that can help you find a bank that might not be in your backyard, that can help you. And as advisors, having the knowledge in your quiver or your toolbox that you could go to 6 or 7 different lenders who will give you 6 or 7 different credit policies and find the one that fits for your
Mhm.
client. And then think that's the biggest part of the battle, because once they're with a bank that has an appetite for their request, the process is not
Mhm.
long and difficult.
Yeah. The core challenge our brand goals, and I think we're doing really well, and I think we'll keep getting better, is to help a entrepreneur understand what their options and alternatives are in English, okay? And then let them make what they hope are the best choices for themselves, okay? And that's really difficult. So every route you choose has some biases, right? Wherever you go for advice has some biases. What I think it's really important for entrepreneurs and small business owners to really understand is that your bank, whatever advice they give you, your banker has its own biases, right? And their institutional biases or their biases driven by the bonus or commission structure of
Mm.
whomever you're talking to. And you need to pull out of that and get some different perspectives about decisions that could dramatically impact your life. And it's super important. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately to tell businesses and entrepreneurs, and I think we do this really well. Like, this is our opinion from our experience. It doesn't mean that there's not a lender out there that's like a needle in the haystack lender that will do what you want, but I don't know who they are. So if you want to go look for that needle in a haystack lender, go ahead. But if you want to get your loan done in a timely and organized manner, we generally know what we're talking about. The other thing I think is super important and I think we're better ready for her first building. And the building she's looking at is like $700,000. It, the numbers make sense versus the rent she's paying now. Okay. What no one had told her, and the lenders that she discussed as, she had from her startup of the business, like a $450,000 pretty high interest usury loan from starting up the business. And in the lenders she had talked about, no one had explained to her that she could take that and refinance that into the loan as well, and actually do that on a 25-year note. And ironically, she could get her building now, okay, and her monthly payments will be lower than about 50% lower than they are now. Like when that happens, that's awesome. Now that doesn't happen all the time. And I share that story not necessarily about the specifics of that, but to reinforce to our listeners that you got to get some different perspectives. You can't just assume that what one person is telling you is fact.
Exactly. Even on a no. And I think that's what excites me about what we do is I would share with borrowers quite frequently, just because one bank says no, it doesn't mean the other one's going to say no. But so many people statistically quit after that first no because they give up. And it's like, and I think too, if we can empower people to understand that one person's opinion isn't everything, right? You've got to try again.
Sometimes you got to kiss a bunch of frogs before you find a prince.
Yes, you do.
That's true. Brandi, what is your feeling about, walking the borrower through the process? And once they have that loan approval, then what? And what are you looking for in a partner for a client after the approval? Because sometimes that's where deals break down when they have the approval and yet they need X, Y, and Z. What are you looking for in a bank once they approve a loan?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's brought up every Monday morning that I've sat in so far in our pipeline meetings, right? Is the borrower really controls the timing of the closing. So much of it, not all of it, but so much of it. And many of our borrowers, unfortunately, I hate to say this out loud, get fatigued, right? This is a process. It is a process. With the right advisor or banker, you're going to be able to move through it relatively smoothly, but you're going to have you're going to have your checklist, then you're going to have another checklist. And then generally you have your closing checklist. And so it's really getting that in up front so borrowers understand that. But if they don't, they get tired. And then you've got that, they lose that steam. So I think the biggest thing is just remember, set priorities with your banker and with your advisor or whomever you're working with to understand what's next, right? What do I need to know next so I can stay ahead of this? How can I support you? And then having the right person, because I'll also say working with a lot of bankers over the years, bankers lose steam too, because it's the squirrel effect, right? They see a squirrel and they're going to the next thing. And so you have to really make sure that you're honing in on the process and working with the right people. But then also if there's a problem, talk about it. Don't shy away from it. If there's something you know is wrong or there's a kink that you're afraid to talk about, you have to talk about it because those are the things that can come up at the end too that people don't see coming. And it delays things because then they have to start over. They have to talk about it more. Be full disclosure, trust your banker, figure it out, and then everybody's on the same team forging forward.
When somebody works with you in particular, what do you think are your strongest attributes to that you bring to the table?
Yes. So I think for me, a few things. One is I've been around a while. I've seen a lot of things, good, bad, or indifferent. It is just a fact of who I am. I would also say that I am pretty honest and forthright and direct. Sometimes that can be hard because it can lead to hard conversations, but those are the conversations that help us to grow. So I would say those two things. And then also process management is a really important thing to me. I love helping clients and seeing those things ahead of time. Talking about the tough stuff up front, not at the end. It breaks my heart when borrowers tell you, I didn't even know I was going to have a mortgage on my house until I went to close with this lender on my loan. And I was like, oh, geez. Okay. We don't do that, right? We talk about it. We try to stay ahead of it. And we do it together. And I do think it talks about that in my bio. Start to finish is really important to me because I love to begin it, but I also really love to celebrate at the end with everyone. So I think those are all probably the attributions that I try to lead daily.
I think that I can't help but talk about the fact that when I was a banker and somebody would, a broker would bring a loan, would fear that, they were giving me something and I'd look at it and go, why would you even think I would consider doing this? And that's something that here at MultiFunding, I feel so proud of all of my colleagues because you're a wonderful example, but they're not going to talk to someone who hasn't been around the block. We have real lenders in this organization to help borrowers from beginning to end who have been through it time and time again, who will have the hard conversations with you and say, listen, we can't take this to a lender until you do X, Y, and Z. And they know that from the get-go. And they also know what to expect so that something like what you just said doesn't ever happen. They're going to know, listen, these are the risks in your deal, and these are what you're going to have to do to mitigate them. And this is what a lender's going to want to know. And I know that because I've been a lender or I've been in this business for 10 plus years. That's what they get when they come to MultiFunding as opposed to another broker. And I hate to say it, but even the word broker brings to mind like used car dealers. That's not what we are. And we do differentiate ourselves. And that's why having Brandi join MultiFunding is just a huge coup because you're one of the people that hits the ground running, meets the criteria and we know that you are going to proudly represent our brand. And everything that you've spoken about with us this morning is exactly what MultiFunding is all about.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I will do everything I can to. And I actually did have a good friend of mine who's been in the industry. He started with me 20 some years ago at the same bank, and we've kind of grown up together. And he did call me and he said, a business advisor? What? And so as we talked, he shared some of what you just stated concerns. And I said, exactly, this is why I'm doing this. Because we do it right. And I will do it right. And I said, so when are you going to send me your first deal? Right.
Right. And you're absolutely right. And that is, something that we have to live with. Listen, a whole entire SBA program has, dirty laundry that goes along with it. And we don't. And we're going to continue to make sure that people understand. And using the word business advisors is really true because that's what we are and that's what we do. And, that's something that we can talk about more. But I would be remiss if we didn't talk about what we're seeing out there as the trend in this economy of what are the types of credits that we're looking at, and more specifically, business acquisitions and growth opportunities because of the way of the world. Baby boomers are still selling their businesses. They're older than they were before COVID, and a lot of them had to wait and see that through before they could. But we're still in that silver tsunami. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I do think, I don't think I've shared, but I am very active in NAGLE. I'm on the board, and that in itself, it's interesting because being present in that room and with NAGLE as an organization has really helped us to get ready for that acquisition boom, because I think it was probably 24 months ago or so at one of the conferences, there was a presentation that talked about 24 to 36 months and the boomers and how many there are. And then it slowed because of COVID, right? And then it's going to start picking up again because profits are back. And so it is going to be, I think, a big part of SBA lending for many years to come. And I also do think more banks, not a lot of banks, but more banks have done it better than they've ever done it. And they've gotten comfortable with the air ball, right? They've gotten comfortable with using cash flow to mitigate that risk. And so I do think it's getting better, but you have to find the right bank because not everyone will want to do that.
Yeah. And
But I think you have to find the right bank, but you also have to be really comfortable that you are buying the right business for yourself, right?
For sure.
And you have to be really uncomfortable that you understand the risks involved in the business that you're buying. And you have to be really comfortable that you feel that you have the relevant experience to manage a business like this. So I think you also have to, there's an interesting balance because we get paid to help people find lenders to close loans. I mean, that's kind of our job. Someone says, I want to find a loan. And if we can find them a lender, we did our job. But on the other hand, we also want to make sure that those, as advisors, that those borrowers really understand the business that they're getting in themselves in for. They understand, and every business and everything has risks. So it's not that it doesn't have risk, but they understand what could go wrong and that they've got, because part of the challenge I find in the business loan advisor, in the business sale space, is the business brokers are representing the sellers, but not the buyers, right?
Yes.
So in reality, the buyers of this business don't really have any representation. We represent the buyers, but we represent the buyers within a very specific vein of helping them to get a loan, right? And so part of what I think we will work on becoming better at is with these acquisitions is really making sure that they understand why and what they're doing. I had a call a few weeks ago with a vet who, or I can't remember, he's not going to be a vet, but he's soon going to be out of the service, right? And he wanted help in buying a marketing agency. And I'm like, dude, why a marketing agency? He's like, well, I read that they're easy to buy,
Boy.
right? I'm like, slow down, like take a minute. Like like we'll help you buy a business, but what's your relevant experience to buy a marketing agency? And so having these discussions with these buyers is difficult. I'm not sure we're perfect at it. We're also motivated by closing loans, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you also really need to make sure that that buyer knows what they're getting themselves in for and why.
yeah, and I think, talking about marketing agencies and other types of service businesses, they need to understand why the seller is selling, what is motivating them to sell. A lot of times it's because the time is right for them to leave, but what is leaving with that seller? Like they've run and owned this business, and now you're going to run and own this business. Can you replace what they brought to the table? And if you can't, to know what it is that you need to bring in so that you can keep the level of business at the same level. And it almost goes all the way back to what Brandy's strength is, and it's relationships. When you're buying a small business, your relationships with your employees and your customers is key to keeping the business operating at the same level that it was. And I think that sometimes gets lost and it doesn't transfer. And I don't think that the buyers even realize what a huge part of making the decision that is.
Well, and guys, what about discretionary ad backs, right? Discretionary ad backs and concentrations. I feel like that's one of the things when I sit down with borrowers, especially buyers, so often the seller, as you said perfectly, is motivated on price, right? All those discretionary ad backs drive up cash flow, which drives up price. Well, when you extract the wife's clothing and the gas and right, all these things that you can't really materialize, your purchase price may be a little bit less because it can't support that if those things really are expenses. And so in concentrations, that one can bite you really hard. I had a marketing company about a year and a half ago that I was actually working with the seller and he brought the buyer to me and 80% of his revenue was driven on one customer. And ultimately the buyer, we talked about it extensively and they countered substantially lower because they were worried about the concentration and having to figure it out if that contract didn't renew. And they ended up not moving forward. The buyer still, or the seller still owns the business, but I think they did what was best for them and that's okay. And they had to have that conversation to know that. So
Right. Very important.
So interesting. I have two thoughts for you two. Ready? Number one is now that Brandi has joined our team, MultiFunding is officially 69.4% female.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I couldn't be prouder of that, especially having these two powerhouses on the left and the right hand side of me on the screen. And I can't remember where it was, but someone said, you want to build a strong company? Just hire a bunch of strong women.
Well, you definitely have a lot of those in your house, Ami. You've got a lot of strong
There
women.
you go. And a lot of people, this is for the entrepreneurs out there, a lot of people say, build a team with people that are smarter than you, right? And I think this conversation is proof of that. Now, we're all smart for different reasons, and we have different skills and different attributes, right? But I'm so honored to have both of you on the team. And Brandi, I'm so honored to have you join us. And I'll tell everyone just one more story. I mean, I like to think of myself as a servant leader. Okay. And I like to help people without any expectations of getting back. Right. And I remember I met Brandi for the first time. I think it was in Salt Lake City, Brandi, maybe 6-8 months ago. And you were just in the midst of your bank had just been sold and they were offering you a package and you weren't sure what to do and this and this and that. And I just tried to help you.
Mm-hmm.
We talked, introduced you to a few people. I wouldn't have dreamed in any of that you would join MultiFunding one day.
Well, Ami, you tried to help place me at 2 other banks before you even asked me to consider it.
So what I would say about that to everybody is the more you give, the more you get. And that's
Amen.
sort of how we run our lives here. And it seems to all be work out. So Brandi, I couldn't be more excited that you're part of us. Lynn, I couldn't be more excited you're part of us too, but you've been part of the furniture a little bit longer.
Yes. It's been up on 5 years next month.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we still have our challenges and our twists and our turns, but we're going to keep pushing through them. And I really appreciate both of you.
Glad to be here and thrilled that Brandi's here.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Anything else I'm missing? If not, we thank you all. And Brandi, welcome.
1 second, Ami. At the end of our podcasts, you always ask the person that we're interviewing, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yes,
Why
Brandi.
don't you ask Brandi that?
Brandi, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
I love that. Thank you very much. I'm always looking for referrals and opportunities to meet with clients. And so you can reach me 2 ways. My cell phone number, which is 320-4108. You can also find me on the website for MultiFunding and reach out by email. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. God bless. Take care. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.